Welcome to our podcast, The Screwtape Letters, Confronting Evil in Our Time. I'm Ian Faith.
And I'm Galen Belinsky. In each episode, we will unpack one of C.S. Lewis's 31 letters and illuminate the nefarious schemes that the devil and his minions play in our world today.
Understanding how the demonic forces seek to separate us from God helps us to expose them,
reject them, and pursue Jesus as the center of our lives.
Subscribe and join us and our guests on this journey, The Screwtape Letters.
Well, welcome back as we head into hour 2 of our special New Year's Eve broadcast. It's, I think, correct to say that I've cried 3 times this year, twice from sadness and once from a welling up of, mere gratitude. Mere is probably the right word. I received a letter and a book about 10 days ago that started off, "Dear Seth, I'm sending along a copy of our book, Confronting Evil in Our Time, written out of a conviction to help people recognize the moral and spiritual challenges C.S. Lewis warned about in the Screwtape letters. Knowing your appreciation for Lewis, we thought this might resonate. Your show was part of the inspiration, and I've marked the page where we reference it." And I go to the page, and sure enough, it reads in this brand new book, Confronting Evil in Our Time, a Christian devotional inspired by C.S. Lewis's The Screwtape letters. It says, "Driving the following week, listening to talk radio, I heard on Seth Leibsohn's show a passing quote that I didn't quite hear it was attributed to. Something paraphrased along the lines of, quote, the devil wanted to make the world so noisy that man could not hear the voice of God, close quote. It resonated so powerfully with me, and researching it at home, I found it was a paraphrase from the Screwtape letters. Well, words fail me, being in the words business, to tell you how meaningful this all is to me. But it is a delight to try and return somewhat of a favor in welcoming one of the co-authors of this book, Confronting Evil in Our Time, Ian Faith, to our show. He and his co-author, Galen Belinsky, have a podcast, Screwtape Letters Podcast.com, which airs weekly. Ian, thank you a million times. Thank you. You really warmed my heart, and you've done the world a favor with this book.
Seth, thank you for all you do, and you're going to get me in trouble with my wife here. I've made someone cry, and I've made someone who's a wordsmith fail with words, so I think I'm in more trouble than I understand.
Well, listen, I don't have words. The idea that a guy named Leibsohn could help be an inspiration for you writing a Christian devotional inspired by C.S. So let's start here. C.S. Lewis. I give an annual commencement address over the airwaves, Ian, and I usually have a quote from C.S. Lewis in it. It's wisdom of others, not my own. Just a bunch of quotes I've put together over the course of a year. And I remember this past year's commencement, I said we should all read more C.S. Lewis, and you've helped make that possible. Tell us about this book, Confronting Evil in Our Time, a Christian devotional inspired by C.S. Lewis's The Screwtape letters. Tell us about how you and Galen, and why you and Galen put this together.
Yeah, and thank you for your inspiration. It's one of those moments where, I really felt 2002, New Year's Eve, I was at a New Year's Eve party, and I always make New Year's resolutions and want to make myself a better person the year coming and lead a better life for myself and my family. And one of the things I wanted to do is dig deeper into my faith. And it was kind of crazy because it was a series of remarkable events that included like driving and hearing that quote, the devil wanted to make the world so noisy man couldn't hear the voice of God. It was like someone slapped me. And I pulled over and I wrote it down. I got home and I got on my computer and I'm like, I've got to find out who this is from. And it's attributed to C.S. Lewis, and it's attributed to the Screwtape letters, even though it's not a direct quote.
No, right.
It's actually it's a quote based on one of the letters where they talk about noise and the infernal noise.
Chapter 15, I think, or letter 15.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
Yes, letter 15. And when you read into that and what Lewis was talking about in there is there's two kinds of noise. There's the noise from God that makes the world more beautiful, which is worship, music, and prayer. And then there's the other side of it, which is the demonic using noise to shut out God's voice. Mm-hmm. And that so resonated with me that I said to myself, I have to do a podcast on this book, because I've known the Screwtape letters before, never dug deep into it, but I really dug deep into it, and I thought I've got to find someone who I can do this book with. And I had a pastor friend, and I thought he'll say no instantly, so I'll have to find somebody else. And Galen said, I'd love to. And since then, we have built the most amazing friendship, helped each other in our both life walk and faith walk. And to all men out there, I think it behooves you to find people in your life to have those walks with, whether it's through faith, whether it's through shared engagement in things you love. But it's just something that just has beautified my life.
Thank you for putting it that way. And I know your work has been for many years in addressing men and the issue of manhood. I've been focusing on it a bit myself lately too, with some books that have come out, particularly a book from a professor at NYU, Scott Galloway's book, and others. But the way you pitch it is, and the way you've done your work, not only on C.S. Lewis, but in helping men who need help, men who generally need help, not just some men who need help, all men need help.
They do.
You've done a really smart and important blending of the spiritual with the social. For example, let me try it this way. In your preface to your book, your Christian devotional on C.S. Lewis, you write, spiritual warfare is not a distant or dramatic idea. It is the quiet and constant battle for the soul that takes place in our hearts, our homes, and our culture. And I think if there's one overarching message that comes from the Screwtape letters, and it's a bold thing to try and find one, but if there is one, it's kind of that. It's kind of Screwtape telling his nephew that we can do our work in the quiet. We can do our work without people noticing it. Better that they don't notice it. Better that things happen slowly. We're not going to rush them into hell. We're going to do it very slowly and very quietly with just little tweaks and meanderings here and there. Yes?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And I think people are looking, when they think of spiritual warfare, for big events, things like the Omen, things like, seeing demonic activity. But I'll give you a great example here. When we were writing the book, we got onto the subject of anxiety. Mm-hmm. And the moment for me that I labeled anxiety a demonic influence, mm-hmm. it changed my life, mm-hmm. because all of a sudden it was no longer a failing in me. Mm-hmm. These were things that were outside forces tilting me off the path that God wanted me on. Mm-hmm. And I've told other people about it, and they sit there and they're, wow, I never thought of it that way. Because you think about anxiety, you're worrying about things that haven't happened yet, may never happen, and sometimes are not even real anyway. And so the moment you label it and identify it, now you can actually fight back against it. And that's where it becomes a really powerful example of using Lewis to say to yourself, okay, this is something that's happening to me, around me, but what's causing it? And the moment you identify it, you can actually do something about it.
We're talking to Ian Faith, co-author of Confronting Evil in Our Time, a Christian devotional inspired by C.S. Lewis's The Screwtape Letters. Let me stay on that for a moment. The anxiety as the work of the demons. Not to discount certain psychological or psychiatric, truly psychiatric problems that people may be going through. There is an abundance of new literature coming out that we are way overdiagnosing. We are way overdiagnosed. There's a piece in the Free Press, it was in Unheard this morning about that very thing and how it particularly falls disproportionately on young people people in the 8th grade, as young as the 8th grade, who start going online and trying to figure out why they don't feel so well. And then, they stumble upon a psychological condition that the internet is happy to continue to persuade them that they have. Only when they finally get real therapy, they find out this is just normal human behavior and normal human sensitivity. But there is something demonic about this inner focus, and I think it goes to something Screwtape writes his nephew in chapter 4, which, as we go to break, maybe we can pick up on when we come right back. I am speaking with Ian Faith, good name, author of Confronting Evil in Our Time, Christian devotional inspired by C.S. Lewis's The Screwtape Letters. You can hear his podcast with his co-host once a week. Screwtapeletterspodcast.com will get you there. We'll be right back.
We wrote this devotional because we were tired of pretending everything was fine. It wasn't. Evil was hitting our families, our peace, and our faith. We needed something that spoke to the battles we were actually living. That's why we wrote Confronting Evil in Our Time.
Welcome back to the Seth Leibsohn Show. Ian Faith is the co-author of Confronting Evil in Our Time, a Christian devotional inspired by C.S. Lewis's The Screwtape Letters. You can get it at Amazon or any online bookstore that you may like. He is the co-host of the Screwtape Letters podcast, screwtapeletters.com, talking about many different ways demons work on us. I first thought about it, Ian, with that very famous broadcast you may or may not be familiar with, that Paul Harvey did back in 1960.
Oh, I'm very aware.
You know it very well. Of course you do. If I Were the Devil. And it looks like it might have very well been inspired by the Screwtape Letters, which was written about 20, 25 years earlier. But let's talk about this being up in our own head and self-diagnosing and turning everything into a psychological condition as the work of the devil. Again, accepting the cases where there are seriously medical psychiatric conditions. I got it out of chapter 4 of the Screwtape Letters. Lewis writes, "It's funny how mortals always picture us as putting things into their minds," or Screwtape does. "In reality, our best work is done by keeping things out." And what Screwtape says to his nephew there is, you must fall back on misdirection. Whenever they are attending to the enemy himself, whenever good people are attending to the enemy himself, we are defeated. But there are ways of preventing them from doing so. The simplest is to turn their gaze away from him towards themselves. Keep them watching their own minds and trying to produce feelings there by the action of their own wills. In other words, turning inward and thinking too much about ourselves. This is a big theme for C.S. Lewis throughout his work, isn't it?
Yeah, and think about what Screwtape's saying there and what Lewis posed, which is keeping things out of their mind, keeping cures out of their mind, keeping faith out of their minds. I think there's something within humanity that when you settle on the fact that there is a creator and you become less about yourself and more about the creator God, you then start to allow things in that do help you heal.
Right.
You allow yourself to be criticized. You allow yourself to take criticism. You allow yourself to become more grateful, more humble, and more accepting of the fact that you are here blessed by God. My grandfather had a most amazing saying, and he wasn't a prophetic man, but he served in the Second World War as a royal signaller. And before he died, he sat there with me and he said, if I have anything to take from these 77 years on this earth, it's that life isn't fair, but was never meant to be fair. Mm-hmm. And when you accept that premise, all of a sudden you stop being the victim. You let yourself live. You let yourself be grateful even for the smallest things in the world. And again, within the demonic warfare, they want to turn us to, I deserve this, and I should have that because I need a Ferrari, and I need all these big things, and God's not being fair to me, rather than the opposite, which is life isn't fair, and I'll take every blessing.
I think attendant to that is probably my favorite essay or speech of C.S. Lewis's, which is How to Live in the Atomic Age. when people are fearing the atomic bomb shortly after World War II. And he has this passage about you can fear death if you want, but you were always destined to die. And what is going to happen when that moment comes, be it from a bomb or a virus, is that you're going to want to be found doing beautiful things, bathing a child, having a pint of beer while playing darts with some friends, reading a good book. But yeah, life isn't fair, and we were all meant to die. It was a guarantee.
Yeah, and I actually write in the book as well that when you think about death, and we actually posed it in the baseball analogy, which is if a baseball game never ended, what a bore fest it would be. Death gives you the ability to look at your life, to evaluate your life, and to look at it and actually plan in advance to see if you're actually delivering value. Are you delivering love to people? Are you making a difference? And that's the beautiful part of death. Yeah, there's the sadness and the loss, and it's a change here on earth, but for believers that there's something beyond earth, that there's heaven awaiting them, it's actually a coming home party. It's something to be mourned, but at the same time, it's that moment to say, hopefully God's going to welcome you with, well done, my good and faithful servant.
Yes, to be able to earn that phraseology or that greeting. I should probably backtrack a half a moment, Ian, and ask you, from your perspective, what is it about C.S. Lewis that has had such a pull on humanity since I don't know, the 1930s? When I was in D.C. many years ago, I lived there, there was a club called Lewis and Linguini, and a Lewis scholar would have people over every, I think, Tuesday night to serve spaghetti and talk about C.S. Lewis. There are all kinds of C.S. Lewis reading clubs. His books, what is it about him? What is it about him?
I actually thought about this, and Lewis had the most amazing knack of using a succinct amount of words to make a prophetic point. Okay. And if you don't mind indulging me, on a Christian note, this is a direct C.S. Lewis quote: if Jesus is not God, then his claims don't matter much at all. Right. But if he is God, then nothing could matter more. And as a Christian, you take that quote and it sits you down, because it means everything when it's phrased like that. So I think he has so many quotes, and there's a couple of organizations out there who actually just monitor quotes and will contact people and say, this isn't a direct C.S. Lewis quote.
Right. Sure. Yeah.
The people go to that lens because what he says is so profound so much of the time. Yeah. Like the quote, integrity is doing the right thing even when no one is watching, is attributed to him. Yeah. No one can find any writing that says it's actually from him.
Right. God helps those who help themselves, as the Bible says, right? One of those things, right. No, nope, sorry, not in there, right.
But that's how revered he is, that there's whole organizations and people who spend their time hunting down people who are misquoting him. And to go back to the original quote that the devil wanted to make the world so noisy, we actually got contacted about that to say that isn't a direct quote from Lewis, which is kind of funny.
No, and you know what? That's the thing about the real quote versus the ersatz quote, is usually the real one is so much the better, and especially when put in context. So of course, when I got this book and I read the reference to me in it, I jumped to what was said in chapter 15, because I've been thinking a lot about noise lately, and there's a lot of noise. There's the noise, from the outside. There's the noise we create in our own heads, and it crowds out. And I'm going to take a break, and I want to come back on noise, if that's okay with you.
Oh, I'd love to.
Thank you. Ian Faith is my guest. He and his co-author, Galen Belinsky, have a brand new book out, Confronting Evil in Our Time, a Christian devotional inspired by C.S. Lewis's The Screwtape Letters. Ian and I will be right back.
We wrote this devotional because we were tired of pretending everything was fine. It wasn't. Evil was hitting our families, our peace, and our faith. We needed something that spoke to the battles we were actually living. That's why we wrote Confronting Evil in our time.
Welcome back to the Seth Leibsohn Show on this special New Year's Eve special. Delighted to be joined by Ian Faith, co-author of a brand new book, Confronting Evil in Our Time, a Christian devotional inspired by C.S. Lewis's The Screwtape Letters. He and his co-author are also the co-host of a wonderful podcast, the Screwtape Letters Podcast, screwtapeletterspodcast.com. Noise is kind of the idea of noise, and behind it was in many parts the catalyst or inspiration for him doing this book, for Ian doing this book. I've been talking a lot about noise lately myself. There's the noise, obviously, from the outside world. There's the noise of the crisis industrial complex that, I talk about a lot, cable news, the Instagram feeds, the Facebooks, the frenzy we're always supposed to be in. I love a quote I've discovered lately from William Buckley, who said there is much to complain about in America, but the awful, keening noise one unhappily gets used to, makes no way for the bells of God. And you write about a lot of this in your book, too, with regard to the noise of social media and the displacement of the joy. Maybe it's entertainment is the right word. The entertainment, particularly young people, but not just young people. I've seen it with old people, too. Right, the entertainment they derive from social media feeds rather than the real thing, which, again, the fake versus the real, but the fake so much worse, but so much more addictive.
But when you think about this whole idea of noise, and someone may look at it and say, well, what do you want, silence all the time? Mm-hmm. And I think this is where it plays into the idea of virtues and vices. The first miracle of Jesus in the Bible was turning water into wine, and I've always seen that as a virtue and vice situation. It's something that can be wholly virtuous, but for an alcoholic, can become a vice that's destructive. Mm-hmm. And in the same way, noise, worship is fantastic, entertainment's fantastic, great talk shows, great education, great books, fantastic. But when you get to a point where there's no solitude in your life,
or nourishment,
right, you get to that point where now you're not growing, mm-hmm. and you're not feeding yourself. Mm-hmm. All you're doing is bombarding yourself. And same with social media. I think there's a place for social media and technology and futures, but when it comes to what we've got at the moment, and I thought about this on my prayer walk this morning, which was, noise isn't just through your ears.
Right.
Noise is through your eyes. Yep. Noise is through the environment around you. Anything that crowds out life in such a way where you ignore your neighbors, you ignore someone who needs help, mm-hmm. you ignore people within your faith community because you're so fixated on noise, and it almost echoes Screwtape here, where you don't take that time for solitude to be guided in, here's what I want you to do next. And I think for a lot of faithful people in various religions, they'll say when they're quiet and listen and hear God's voice, and it isn't just, wacky people or people who are hearing voices that hear God's voice. God talks. We just are not quiet enough to listen. And so going back to that, drowning things out with noise, it's a beautiful thought for the demonic to make sure we can't hear God. Absolutely
right. And thank you for putting it that way. It is the opposite of hearing God. When I think Kings, the still small voice, right? That's right. What we are asked to hear. And so in chapter 15, Lewis writes, the melodies, or Screwtape says, the melodies and silences of heaven must be shouted down in the end. And I admit we are not yet loud enough or anything like it, right? The loud drowns out the still small voice.
And how amazing. You think about 1939, 1940, right, when Lewis is writing this. Yeah. He's probably writing it in a very quiet study in Oxford University.
Right.
To think forward that this would be an age that would come, there's a certain amount of prophetic nature in that.
Yes.
And it is a warning for us. This is where we have to let these voices in, like Lewis's, to understand how that affects us. Because when you read truth, whether it's scriptural truth or it's just empirical truth in your day-to-day life, there's something about it that hits you differently than lies.
Yes.
And you only get that if you have the time to
Yeah,
look.
that's an interesting point. When the truth hits you, I was thinking about that in the model of self-improvement, resolutions, maybe even 12-step meetings. Let me pick up on that because there's something really important there, and something important too about the need to repeat the truth,
Right.
to constantly reinforce it, because Screwtape and Wormwood are never at rest. Ian Faith is my guest. He and I will be right back.
We wrote this devotional because we were tired of pretending everything was fine. It wasn't. Evil was hitting our families, our peace, and our faith. We needed something that spoke to the battles we were actually living. That's why we wrote Confronting Evil in our time.
Welcome back to the Seth Leibsohn Show on our special New Year's Eve broadcast. Delighted to have Ian Faith with us. His brand new book with his co-author is Confronting Evil in Our Time, a Christian devotional inspired by C.S. Lewis's The Screwtape letters. If you missed earlier parts of this interview, please go back on our website and hear it for the whole origin story. Let's talk about the truth for a moment, Ian, as you were just saying it. You said something along the lines of when the truth hits you, when you hear the truth, it does move you in a way. And it's interesting to me, people will have that often, whether a friend tells them an important quote, could be from C.S. Lewis, whether they hear something in church or synagogue, whether they hear it in a 12-step meeting, and they resolve resolutions. They resolve, yes, I believe that. I am now going to live by the prayer of St. Francis or something. And then they leave the room, and they get in a car, and someone cuts them off on the street, and it all goes right out the window. We need the constant reinforcement of it because the bombardment's much more deliberate, by the way, than someone cutting you off in a car. The bombardments from television, the bombardments from social media, the bombardments that come easily distract. And you write a lot about distraction. You say distraction diverts our focus in your book.
Well, when you also think about truth, when you hear truth, the next step with truth is to ingest it, but also to share it as well. And that's where it lies. And I look at addiction. You hinted at addiction.
Yeah, we can talk about that too. Go right ahead. I think it's important.
Yeah, an addiction is a lie.
Right.
An addiction is a lie because it makes you think like Lewis has this brilliant idea of the law of undulation. And again, this is one of these brilliant premises when you say to yourself, it's a natural pattern of life to have peaks and valleys. Mm-hmm. And when you're in the valley, worship through it. When you're at the peak, praise and be grateful through it. Because the valley will come and then the trough will come. Or the peak will come. And what addiction does to you, again, it goes back to this idea that life isn't fair. And it is one of Satan's great lies because it pulls you away. It pulls you away from the truth. It pulls you away from sharing with others. It isolates you. And another great theme that we hit on in here is the hunting technique of animals is the same as the demonic. You separate weak people from the herd so you can destroy them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you have a sense, I was talking about this yesterday, and obviously a week like this, I'm talking a little more spiritually and religiously than I do most of the year, but just that time of year brings this on. I was thinking about your book. I was thinking about Paul Harvey's broadcast, If I Were the Devil. And I was thinking about what you just said, separating the weak from the strong, that we have a duty as Americans, might conflict a little bit with separating the weak from the strong, maybe not, that if the devil were to go after his greatest adversary, the demons would be here in profusion. This country. This is why I'm so worried about the condition of our young people right now. This is why I'm so worried about these most important statistics, like over the past 20 years, a 30% decline in church attendance in this country. There has been no religious shift in the history of this country as great as that. This is not good.
No, it isn't. But this is where I think this work's important, because I think if faith is just a feel-good movement,
okay,
you'll find other things to feel good about.
Correct.
And we were even talking in our men's coffee group this morning about how there's a lot of sin that is in the world that feels really good. And a friend of ours actually wants a T-shirt with, sin is good. On the back it says hell is hard. Mm-hmm. And the reason for that is because of that whole reason. Like, if people knew that the demons and things were very real and overt and you could see them, they would run to faith in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
The goal of them is to stay hidden. The goal of our faith is to be something that strengthens you and edifies you. And it's a real subtle game that's being played. But again, the moment you start realizing some of those things, now you get yourself into a situation where you can look at addictions. You can look at alcoholism and say, what's it doing to me and my family? It's separating me from my wife. It's making my kids look at me differently. It's isolating me. It's not giving me solitude. It's giving me isolation. And that's where dangers kick in.
Yeah, the dangers, yes, of course, especially when one considers one of the markers of addiction is the continued practice of it in light of ever spiraling downward consequences, right?
Right.
But addiction, like so many other things, does kind of go back to the very first chapter of the Screwtape letters, doesn't it? Our task there is to fuddle him. You would think from listening to the young, it's actually to teach. That fuddlement, yeah, that's a word I've loved for years. You seized on it in your book as well. And it has to do with distraction diverting from focus and fuddlement blurring focus, yeah?
And Seth, that fuddlement word's a word actually we used in England growing up.
You did use it? It was
and I talked to Galen about it, and I said, we'd say we're fuddled all the time.
Oh, okay.
He said, I've never heard that word before, or never been familiar with it. And it's one of those great words because it really is a point when I've even said to people who are talking about, like, should I not drink at all? I don't know. I don't want to become an alcoholic. I say, look, maybe with everything you do in life, the moment you start to feel fuddled, maybe that's a marker for you that there's your limit. And now you're crossing over from virtue to vice.
Mm-hmm. 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 Hard to convince. This is probably the greatest of challenges, or one of them. Hard to convince someone who may not have God in their life, or a notion, or a religious effort through their soul. Hard to convince them of the dangers of vice. But the handy thing about this is if you can overcome the fuddlement, is you can see real-world consequences.
Yes.
C.S. Lewis talks in another piece in The Abolition of Man, right? I love the title of that, The Abolition of Man. And he talks about what happens when men without chests, let us say, and we take away all the things we know are supposed to be healthy and wholesome, nurturing. We take away all these things, and we can look all around us and see the consequences. We can see real-world consequences. Look at what the 20-something men are doing now, things we've never seen before. This has risen at the same time of the greatest of fuddlements. You can actually draw the line. Jonathan Haidt has done so with the advent of the smartphone and social media. You don't have to necessarily think about an invisible God if you just look around you and say, my God, what has happened to our society, right? Let me pause on that and have you address it on the other side of this break. Ian Faith is my guest. His brand new book, Confronting Evil in Our Time, a Christian devotional inspired by C.S. Lewis's The Screwtape Letters. We'll be right back.
We wrote this devotional because we were tired of pretending everything was fine. It wasn't. Evil was hitting our families, our peace, and our faith. We needed something that spoke to the battles we were actually living. That's why we wrote Confronting Evil in Our Time.
I want to thank Ian Faith for joining us. I want to thank him even more for his book, Confronting Evil in Our Time, a Christian devotional inspired by C.S. Lewis's The Screwtape Letters, and for his very generous letter to me and mention of me in the book. Ian, just a few minutes left, but the men without chests notion. Dr. Atlas yesterday, I quoted saying, America's young people are now front and center in a popular way, but for the wrong reasons. This has been Generation Z that assassinated Charlie Kirk, who you dedicate your book to, attempted to kill President Trump, shot up schools, murdered the United Healthcare CEO. Comprised of those born between 97 and 2012, it is a profoundly damaged generation, scarred by ideological indoctrination, social media's corrosive grip, raised during a societal assault on moral anchors like religion and traditional families. This, Ian, is why I am so passionate about talking about the decline in church, the decline in family cohesion and marriage. It is at record levels, and you cannot beat the forces of decomposition with a nullity. You have to have forces of composition.
Yeah, you talked about something very important with this Gen Z crowd, which is they've suffered from the destruction of the family that we've seen being attacked constantly. And again, that's something we write about heavily in the book, the attack on marriage, the attack on relationships, the attack on the family unit that began in Genesis. But you also mentioned earlier, like in the last segment, about people who don't have God. And it reminded me of a great G.K. Chesterton quote that when man doesn't believe in God, they don't believe in nothing, they'll believe in anything.
That's exactly right.
And that's the piece that really you're seeing out there. And I think, again, it's a win for the demonic. You get them to believe in anything. Yeah. They'll believe in
the wisdom of bin Laden at Columbia University. If you can get someone to believe a man is a girl and a girl is a man, or there's no difference, you can get them to believe anything. But there is a revival going on. Yes.
One thing I'm seeing in our church groups and in men's groups is younger people saying they want to lead a life with Christ. They want to have a religious family. They want to walk in the ways of God rather than the ways of the world and help. And they're looking to us older men who are totally broken, with a big part of the problem, to actually help them with that. But we can be of help because we can look back, know that we've made mistakes, say, look, this is part of our sin. We wish we could have had that chance again, but we can now use that as a way to guide these kids forward. And the more we do that, the more hope there is for the world. And you mentioned this time of year talking about spiritual warfare, talking about religion. You look at the Christmas songs that have "to save us all from Satan's power." People sit in churches and recite the Lord's Prayer, "deliver us from evil" or the evil one. Again, they're talking about these things, but not understanding the effect that evil has. And in our book, Confronting Evil in Our Time, that's the exact point. Make it front and center to them, because this will give them courage to face these things.
And make it real. Ian Faith, Happy New Year. Thank you, sir.
Happy New Year to you, Seth. God bless.
God bless you.